Recently, I watched a YouTube video about the anime Evangelion, which sparked my interest in the show again. The anime features characters named Shinji and Rei, leading me to think more deeply about the series and its storyline. Interestingly, Rei is revealed to be a clone of Shinji's mother. The concept of cloning in the show made me consider how clones relate to the individuals they are derived from. Are they exact replicas, or are they more similar to twins, who aren't always identical? From what I can gather, 2 different DNA samples are taken and mixed together to create Rei. So, would that make her Shinji's sister biologically? The second sample of DNA came from a supernatural source. Does that change things? What is the meaning of this? Should I find this unsettling? Is it necessary to interpret this through a Freudian perspective of incest? I personally don't believe that's the case. Evangelion is a complex narrative that employs symbolic storytelling techniques. The characters Rei and Shinji are portrayed as romantic interests, which adds layers to the story. Instead of focusing on a literal explanation for the existence of its motifs within the story's universe, it's more important to appreciate that these motifs have significance and meaning in the broader context of the narrative. The literal, in-universe explanation for why its motifs exists doesn't matter. What matters is that the motifs simply exist and mean something. A motif in literature, art, music, or any other form of expression is a recurring element that has symbolic significance in a story. It can be a concept, a character, an image, a theme, a symbol, or even a particular word or phrase. Motifs have symbolic significance and contribute to a deeper meaning. An example of a motif is the One Ring in The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. The ring is a central motif representing power and the corrupting influence it has. Its presence influences the plot and the characters' motivations throughout the trilogy. They don't have to be complicated. Oftentimes, it's fairly easy to intuit what's a motif in a movie and what isn't. An important detail about motifs is that they exist outside of yourself. This detail is one factor that distinguishes them from archetypes. An important detail about archetypes is that they exist within you. They do not exist in the outside world. It is the inner archetype within you that recognizes the meaning of an image, or character, or idea. Archetypes exist within your subconscious, and as odd as it seems, they try to communicate with you. They do not use words, though. They are not like a split personality, and they are not like your ego. They're simply psychic phenomena that resonate within you when you encounter something meaningful. The way that they communicate with you is through feelings. Feelings are not planned by your conscious awareness, and instead appear to be involuntary. To reiterate, archetypes are within you. They resonate when you come into contact with something in the outside world that is meaningful. Whatever you are reacting to becomes a symbol. And if it's a reoccurring theme that you see over and over again in a story, then it's a motif. People often compare archetypes to frameworks that help us understand different characters or themes in stories. Common examples of archetypes are the hero, the mentor, the mother figure, the trickster, and the journey. Archetypes themselves are abstract concepts and can't be observed directly. However, you can encounter real-life examples of these archetypes, like a mentor or a mother figure. These real-life examples are symbols or representations of the broader archetype they embody. Archetypes can be represented by characters, themes, symbols, or even plots. Archetypes are psychological phenomena that cannot be seen or interacted with directly, such as their nature, hence the need for symbols, which you can in fact see. Your unconscious mind exists alongside your conscious ego, meaning that as you experience life and observe things, it's not just your conscious self, or ego, that's processing these events. Your subconscious is also actively perceiving them. This subconscious is a separate space where thoughts and emotions reside, though their activity often goes unnoticed. However, the psychic phenomena, which take place within your subconscious, are far from being inconsequential. They can influence your waking life without you even knowing it. And when this phenomenon wants to talk to you, it does not use words, it uses emotion. Emotions arise spontaneously and without planning. When a profound sense of meaning emerges from within and enters your conscious awareness, then we can consider this the way that archetypal forces communicate with you. From an invisible, intangible realm, something is compelled to reach out and indicate when you've encountered something meaningful. You cannot witness an archetype directly, but you can feel a resonation with archetypes when you encounter motifs and symbols in a story. Gravity, an invisible force, draws and gathers physical objects. Similarly, an archetype is like the mass, the source of this gravitational pull. Motifs and symbols are like materials influenced and captured by this pull, offering observable hints that you can actually see regarding the archetype's nature. It's worth repeating. Archetypes are within you. Symbols and motifs are outside of you and act as clues regarding an archetype's nature. Archetypes originate from the collective unconscious. Think of it as a psychic component that exists within all humans. The collective unconscious contains elements common to all humans. Essentially, what exists in the collective unconscious for one person is also present for everyone else. While motifs and symbols may vary across cultures, reflecting different expressions of meaning, the underlying archetypal forces that create this meaning to begin with are universal. Evangelion is a show that emphasizes symbolism over literal interpretation. It features characters reacting strangely to events that sometimes use seemingly random phrases to describe some aspect of the plot, which might seem confusing. The key is to not view it through the lens of the real world, as its intent is not to be straightforward. This complexity has led to discussions about the show's depth and intricacy. It's important to approach it with an understanding of its symbolic nature, rather than expecting conventional storytelling. The characters Rei and Shinji have a complicated dynamic. Rei is not exactly Shinji's mother, but she has a connection to her. Rei is a generationally transcendent representation of something, as she is similarly aged to Shinji. Rei fundamentally comes from the mother, the previous generation. Symbolically, this means something. It is just a question of what. Shinji himself represents more than just a character in a story. He exists as a vessel for the audience to inhabit, or at least those members of the audience that can sympathize with his situation, like young men. I believe that this ties into the idea of inherited attachment styles. These subconscious models of love have in fact been shown to be passed down through generations. From a young age, individuals subconsciously seek to understand what biological success looks like and what attitudes just so happen to be associated with it. A child subconsciously looks to their caregiver to get a sense of these things, thusly shaping their future relationships and psychological development. This exploration of deep-rooted psychological patterns is a key aspect of the characters' interactions within the show's narrative. This is a question that people, at a very young age, try to subconsciously answer. Children look to their immediate caregivers, usually parents, as examples of biological success, defined by reaching adulthood and reproducing. They observe and internalize the caregiver's attitude towards love in the form of internal models of understanding, thusly forming their own concepts of biological success and attachment styles. These styles, often inherited, are based on the perception of their parents as successful adults who have achieved the biological goal of reproduction. And like I said before, the attitude that the parents have toward love is also internalized. This internalized model of love, like I said before, can be generationally observable. Attachment styles are primarily formed in early childhood. A child often develops a secure attachment when caregivers are consistently attentive and sensitive, creating a lesser need for attention when they are ready to engage in exploration of the environment. Securely attached children can regulate their emotions efficiently as they interact with the world. In contrast, inconsistent or insensitive care can lead to insecure attachment styles, like being anxious, avoidant, or disorganized. Children use their parents as a model to understand what biological success looks like, as they are too young to explore the world themselves. Parents, having achieved reproductive maturity, are seen as successful examples of those who have survived to adulthood and reproduced. Freud suggested that there's an incestuous aspect in psychology, but while some of his ideas remain insightful, others are outdated. It's not about an incestuous relationship, but about using parents as a model for understanding. For understanding love, the roles we should play in relationships, the attitudes we should have towards loved ones, and approaching the subject of biological success. We subconsciously internalize these observations without elaborate reasoning, and therefore without correction of parents' potential imperfections. Our caregivers in childhood are the mold we use for forging the metaphorical shape of love in our life. Regardless of whether a child perceives their parents' relationship as healthy, the subconscious mind tends to use them as a model for understanding biological success. This process isn't deliberate or creative. It's an automatic response where the child internalizes their parents' characteristics as a standard for love and relationships, including romantic ones. This isn't about an incestuous desire, but rather about using one's caregivers as a template for what to expect when you get old enough to explore the world on your own, and when you find a mate. It is as if some part of the subconscious is asking, what do viable partners look like for when I get out into the world? Oh, I don't need to look very far. I have technically successful examples right in front of me. The mind, in its efficiency and guesstimating blindness, relies on readily available models. As children, our subconscious is eager to understand the world, but being young and vulnerable, we cannot explore the world directly, personally. So we rely on our immediate social relationships for clues. Historically, humans reached sexual maturity relatively quickly when compared to when the brain is fully matured. As a matter of fact, we are barely old enough to begin exploring the world by the time we have reached sexual maturity. Puberty and sexual maturity begins at around 13 to 14 years old. If you lived in a world where you don't get to live past 25, either you reproduce sooner rather than later, or the species goes extinct. Or at least that's the impression I get based on the aforementioned fact that humans reached sexual maturity relatively quickly when compared to when the brain is fully matured. There was a need to quickly understand and adopt technically successful biological and relational behaviors early on, preparing us for the start of our independent journey. This transition marks the shift from dependence on caregivers to the onset of adulthood. Or at least historically speaking, there used to be. Obviously, these days, people don't strike it out into the world until more later than 14 years old. There was a long period of history where humans simply didn't live very long, meaning that you needed to achieve biological successes relatively early, waiting to achieve mental maturity at age 25 before having kids was a luxury in a dangerous world. There are significant psychological and emotional consequences, backed by statistics, for engaging in sexual activity at a young age. This is why the idea of young teenagers entering the adult sexual sphere is instinctively unsettling, even if they have reached puberty. Such behavior is linked to a harsh reality that is generally seen as undesirable. In any case, humans evolved to be equipped with internalized attachment patterns before the beginning of their journey of independence and at the beginning of their sexual maturity. This internalized model influences our understanding of love and relationships, as seen in Shinji's complex dynamics with Rei in Evangelion. Internalizing a caregiver's attitude towards love and their attachment style is a subconscious process that occurs in early childhood before one has the capacity to theorize about effective or functional attitudes. This process is not about evaluating the functionality or healthiness of the parent's attitudes. It's a primal, instinctual drive aimed at survival and learning how to navigate the world, even if the models provided are flawed or dysfunctional. While this model is automatic and instinctual, like language acquisition, it's not fixed. As we grow, we have the opportunity to reflect, change, and develop beyond these early influences. These attachment styles are not set in stone and can change over time. At the age of 14, Shinji's understanding of relationships and adulthood is limited by his narrow life experiences. He has crystallized a model of the world, which unfortunately falls short of truly preparing him for real-world challenges. It does not serve him well with his relationships. This guesstimation did not actually prepare him for the world, but he wishes that it did. This is represented by his hanging on to Rei. In the later parts of Evangelion, Shinji encounters a scenario where Rei, although physically present, has a completely different personality from the one he knew. This change deeply affects Shinji, highlighting that his attachment to Rei goes beyond physical attraction or sexual gratification. It emphasizes that Shinji's connection with Rei is rooted in the unique personality and attachment pattern they share. Shinji's distress over Rei's altered state underscores the depth of his attachment to her original personality. Confronted with this problem, Shinji begins to realize that his attachment style is anxiety-based. Attachment goes beyond mere physical access to a caregiver. It encompasses the caregiver's emotional engagement and responsiveness to a child's needs. This emotional investment is critical for a child's psychological development. It shapes their sense of security and self-worth, influencing their ability to form healthy relationships in the future. In a nurturing environment, a caregiver's attentive and empathetic interaction fosters a secure attachment, enabling the child to develop confidence and resilience. Conversely, a lack of emotional investment can lead to insecure attachment patterns, affecting the child's emotional and social development. At this point in the story, Shinji remains physically young and doesn't mature, symbolizing a lack of growth and change internally. Despite the potential for personal development, Shinji stays fixed in his old ways, particularly evident when Rei, representing the old model and his static state, passes away, but then is desperately wrestled back into existence by Shinji. The series also explores themes of escapism, where Shinji must choose between facing reality or avoiding it. This narrative suggests the importance of acknowledging and adapting one's internalized behaviors and attachment styles, especially when these are rooted in a dysfunctional past. The goal is to evolve past flawed internalized models of understanding, not to desperately cling to them. Even if you manage to hold on, you'll start to realize the negative impact they have on you. This is where the theme of escapism is worth mentioning. Some part of you will understand that your status quo is wrong. Some part of you will ache for change because some part of you knows that you must change. With escapism, you could numb the pain of this, numb your awareness. Like a bone that has healed incorrectly and now causes you chronic pain, it must be broken and reset correctly, which is a painful and unpleasant form of healing. Or you can avoid this and take painkillers to ignore the chronic pain that your dysfunction inflicts on you. Shinji's inability to mature, symbolized by his refusal to let Rei go, highlights a deeper struggle with change and personal growth. This struggle is further explored through the theme of escapism, where Shinji, and by extension the audience, are confronted with the choice between facing the state of disarray in reality or numbing your awareness of it through avoidance. Shinji makes drastic decisions, influenced by the attachment style he internalized in childhood, prioritizing the return of his idealized figure, Rei, over the greater world. Rei symbolizes more than just a character. She is the archetypal answer to the primordial question of, what do viable partners look like for when I get out into the world? Rei symbolizes Shinji's rough guess of what a lover might be like, a concept shaped and inherited by the past generation. His refusal to change or move on results in bitterness from those around him. The greater world, represented by the people in it, are now upset with Shinji for his attempted sacrifice of them. It's worth reiterating. Rei's character symbolizes an internalized model of an expectation. The expectation of what a viable partner looks like. A model informed by attachment styles and models of understanding developed in youth. This guesstimation did not actually prepare him for the world, but he wishes that it did. Certain psychic activity within us yearns for relevancy. It wishes to become acknowledged and expressed in conscious life. And when you try to do away with it, you might put it out of your awareness, but it doesn't go away. It may sink below the surface, attain an autonomous characteristic, and become darkened by its imprisonment within your Jungian shadow. This is called a complex, but I will touch upon that later. Even if certain psychic activity is best left unacted upon and left conventionally unexpressed, shunning it is not the answer. You can deal with it through the Zen practice of metacognition. Again, I will expand on that later. For now, at this part of the narrative, just know that the world and the people in it have become bitter towards him. His unwillingness to evolve or let go leads to resentment from the world around him, which survives despite sacrificing it. The world does not forget his actions. In Evangelion, Shinji's inability to develop a secure attachment style is evident, and so, Shinji remains anchored in a dysfunctional internalized model of understanding, making extreme choices like sacrificing the world for Rei, an idealized figure he is compelled to love and cling to. Shinji eventually gets Rei back, but she is altered, her personality now empty, a lack of inner life. This could symbolize that, just like an archetype, she is not a person. She does not have a personality of her own. The archetypes within our unconscious are not split personalities. They are a psychic energy that do indeed have some degree of autonomy, but they are not real people. If she is symbolic of an archetypal force, then that could explain why she resonates with so many people who are fans of the series. However, this also makes her character seem devoid of the depth and complexity that typically define human experiences. There is something unsatisfying about this finished product that can no longer be changed. And there is something unfitting about that, because we wish to grow with the people we love. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But Rei, in this state, is a finished product, for lack of a better phrase. There is no transformative potential within her, and Shinji finds this unsettling. Emotional attachment implies a lack of contentment with the present moment's prospects, contrasting with the idea of releasing attachment to material things. However, this is acceptable. Sometimes it's beneficial to diverge from Zen philosophy in pursuit of a fulfilling and meaningful life. It is a meaningful experience to care about something, to become emotionally attached to it, to acknowledge and behold it. It does not seem like it is enough to let chance determine the well-being of our attachment figure, so we must be there for it. We want our loved ones to love us back. We want them to be well, so therefore we want a great deal of worldly things in this way. And this is gratifying in a deeply meaningful manner. That is not to say that such attachment is immune to being unhealthy, only that it doesn't have to be unhealthy. Certainly there is a dysfunctional way of becoming attached that we must be wary of. But it isn't written in stone. Until you make things within your unconscious consciously known, they will govern your life, and you will call it fate. The concept of a non-evolving, non-dynamic, finished product that cannot change, nor respond with sufficient inner life, is unsatisfying in the context of relationships. We inherently desire growth and evolution with our loved ones. Emotional attachment, by its very nature, signifies a lack of complete satisfaction with the way things are. You wish for an outcome different from the current state of things. My very heart is invaluable to me. It keeps me alive, but I do not think of it at all. If I began having issues with my heart, suddenly I'd pray for it, consider it, think about it. I would not be content with my issue. Perhaps my heart has always been worth knowing, but I was not pained to do so. This longing for mutual growth and emotional depth with others is what enriches life, making the pursuit of worldly attachments, like reciprocal love and spiritual well-being, deeply meaningful. This does not mean that Zen teachings are worthless and should be forgotten. We need that type of attitude in our life sometimes. But our species will die if we all just sit around with no drive to do anything, even if the cause of this lack of drive is enlightenment itself. So we must find meaning with our partners and within the greater world to some degree. Now, I go the other way. I talked about the ways that Zen teachings may not help us. Now I will speak about how such teachings can be crucial. Zen teachings involve a process of metacognition, a deliberate awareness of the psychic activity that we can consciously observe. Even though we can notice some of our mental activities, we often miss many of them. Psychotherapists think that by becoming better at understanding our own thinking, metacognition, people can change from being anxiously attached in relationships to being securely attached. Being aware of and recognizing your own thoughts and mental state can help you develop a more secure way of connecting with others. Carl Jung once said that a man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions had not overcome them. Not all conscious psychic activity is emotionally neutral. It may be unpleasant to behold, but behold it you must, when you are ready. The sooner the better, though, if you ask me. It would appear that one key component to being healthy emotionally and mentally is to have your inner life become recognized, if not by your caregivers or the people around you, then by yourself. One strategy in dealing with emotional pain, or dealing with aspects of yourself that you consider inferior, is through suppression. You might wipe the awareness of these things from your conscious mind, but they continue to live in the subconscious. These things may become a complex, which haunt you without your conscious realization of the fact. So what can be done instead? You must feel whatever these negative aspects bring. Feel it fully. Pass through their inferno. Allow them to become expressed, for they will find a way to become expressed in any case, and affect your conscious life whether you know it or not. Allow them to run their course. So then, this is the next step for Shinji. He must not suppress or avoid these things. Rei, on the other hand, appears to lack evidence of any inner life at all at this point. This state implies a kind of stagnation, a cessation of existence, where there is no further development or emotional depth to explore. While Rei's lack of change stems from no disparity within her inner life, Shinji's lack of growth and maturation is driven by his old attachment patterns and unresolved emotional issues. He possesses disparities ripe for correction, in a state of potential. His stagnation is rooted in his inability to let go of old models of understanding, particularly his fixation on Rei as a symbol of his attachment style. Let's use lightning as a model of understanding. We can draw parallels between lightning and the inner life experienced by these characters. Lightning arises from the separation of polarity, highlighting the energy and power generated when negative and positive charges rapidly converge. Lightning exists because opposite forces yearn to be complete. Before lightning becomes lightning, it exists as a state of potential. This state of potential exists because positive and negative energies simply exist in the environment. There are reasons for why these energies exist in the environment, but I do not wish to go off on a tangent. Just know that by some natural phenomenon, these two energies naturally wish to seek each other out. This is what I'm calling a state of potential. When a cloud accumulates a significant amount of negative charge at its bottom, it leads to a rapid movement of that negative charge towards the Earth's surface. As a result, the positive charges in the ground are drawn towards this negative energy, causing positive charge to move upward from the ground. This process creates a visible column of distortion that is occasionally observable. We can say that when lightning comes into existence, as brief as it is, it represents life. It represents existence, not just potential, but actualization. When lightning is finished, when potential has run its course, there isn't anything else. It's over. The lightning has finished. Rei is likened to finished lightning. This signifies a state of neutrality, lack of potential, lack of inner life. Her character is technically in a state of contentment, not necessarily bliss, as that would represent one side of polarity. Instead, she simply has an absence of any inner activity at all. The suffered crucifying tension between opposites becomes the vessel by which we are liberated from opposites. And a man that has not suffered through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them. Shinji can be likened to the state of things where lightning has not yet taken place, a state of powerless waiting, a state of anxiety. It is a state of non-existence that somehow still possesses tension and looming dread. Thus far in the narrative, we can say that Rei is described as a completed product, for lack of a better phrase, akin to nothingness after lightning strikes. This implies that once her transformation or development has occurred, there is no further change. Shinji is depicted as being in a constant state of tension, which causes him great inner turmoil that affects his conscious life, whether he wishes for that to be the case or not. Whether he engages in escapism, it still haunts him. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but it's worth mentioning that when you suppress parts of yourself that you don't like or accept, you push the matter below your conscious awareness. And in doing so, in time, you create clusters of independent mental energy. These clusters, which influence your conscious thoughts and actions from the background of your mind, are known as complexes. In Carl Jung's analytical psychology, complexes are considered autonomous instances of psychic phenomena. A complex is a collection of thoughts, feelings, attitudes, and memories that revolve around a single concept. These complexes have their own patterns and behaviors, and can act independently of the conscious will. They are autonomous in the sense that they can influence a person's feelings and behavior in ways that might seem separate from, or even contrary to, their conscious intentions. Shadow work, a term also derived from Carl Jung's analytical psychology, refers to the process of exploring and integrating the parts of oneself that are typically hidden in the shadow of the unconscious. These are aspects of our personality that we are either unaware of or choose to ignore, because they are at odds with our conscious self-image. Shadow work can be challenging due to various factors. Firstly, it involves confronting uncomfortable truths about oneself, such as negative traits or unfulfilled desires, which can disturb one's self-image. This process often stirs up intense emotions like anger or guilt, potentially affecting personal relationships and interactions with others. The ego may resist these changes, leading to denial or conflicts. As individuals engage in shadow work, their perceptions and attitudes might shift, altering relationships and social dynamics. This transformation can disrupt established behavioral patterns and roles within relationships, causing discomfort for both the individual and those around them. These challenges highlight the complex and often turbulent nature of shadow work. Expressing the contents of one's shadow can be disruptive to others due to several factors. It often results in unexpected behavioral changes, as suppressed aspects of personality emerge, which can confuse or unsettle those familiar with the individual's previous behavior. Emotional outbursts, such as anger or sadness, are common as these repressed emotions surface, potentially causing difficulty for others. This process can also alter relationship dynamics, as individuals reassess and change their roles, leading to misunderstandings and conflicts. A tendency to project negative traits onto others can strain relationships further. Engaging in conversations about these shadow aspects can be challenging, particularly if they involve shared experiences or traumas. Additionally, others may resist or feel threatened by these personal changes, fearing the impact on the relationship or discomfort with the change itself. Here the theme of escapism returns, because we can say that Shinji does not do the cumbersome shadow work required. He experiences a state of discomfort and tension. Here he is burdened with unfulfilled potential. To cope with these uneasy feelings, he turns to distractions and disengages emotionally, numbing his discomfort. On the flip side of avoidance, it seems that following a transformative experience, one may reach a state of peace. Yet this prompts a thought-provoking question. Is it ever possible for life and personal development to reach a point of complete stillness? The idea is that if growth stops, a person reaches a state of finality, halting their evolution, and in a sense, ceasing to truly live. This idea is represented by Rei, at least at this point in the story. Shinji, even with Rei's constant physical presence, feels unsatisfied, longing for a deeper connection or essence within her. However, his search for this depth is unsuccessful. This lack of progression, coupled with Rei's seeming emptiness and lack of potential, is disturbing to him. It suggests that Rei is more like an inanimate doll than a living, evolving being. In the anxious, preoccupied attachment style, children experience attachment figures who are unpredictable, alternating between attentive and unresponsive. This inconsistency makes children hypervigilant, looking outwards for their emotional regulation. They are uncertain about their needs being met, leading to high levels of anxiety upon separation. They may show a mix of seeking comfort and displaying anger, and perhaps other negative emotions upon their reunion with their attachment figure. If you have an anxious, preoccupied attachment, you might struggle to feel stable and safe in relationships. You may often worry about being rejected or isolated. This fear can make you act in ways that seem overly attached, controlling, possessive, or needy. The attachment style that heavily emphasizes emotional availability from attachment figures is known as secure attachment. Healthy emotional availability from attachment figures marks the beginning of secure attachment. This interaction is symbolic. Rei represents Shinji's unmatured aim for an attachment figure. And here, Shinji realizes what important ingredient he is missing for maturation. Shinji has physical availability to Rei, which he realizes is not enough. But he does not escape into fantasy. He does not play pretend with her. He wants her to be her own person, who is worth getting to know. One way that he can sacrifice the world, metaphorically speaking, is if he engages in fantasy and escapism. He does not want to LARP as husband and wife with a doll. He wants something real. To establish a more profound and fulfilling connection with Rei, he needed to summon the courage to engage with reality, a far more audacious and brave undertaking than sacrificing reality for her. A healthy balance must be struck. It is not healthy to show up to a relationship with too much neediness, and it is not healthy to receive very little emotional availability either. So, what gives? Doesn't Shinji need an attachment figure in the first place in order to govern him into a healthier attachment pattern? Doesn't it necessarily require another person's strict cooperation for this? No, it does not. I will cover how later. For now, realize that Shinji, letting go and working on himself, is his next best move. And indeed, he does this. Like I said earlier, Rei's character symbolizes an internalized model of an expectation. The expectation of what a viable partner looks like. A model informed by attachment styles and models of understanding developed in youth. This guesstimation did not actually prepare him for the world, but he wished that it did. This was represented by his hanging on to Rei. Rei, the rough guess of what a romantic partner looks like, whose configuration was informed by the previous generation. Sacrificing the world for the sake of an attachment to a model of understanding, an idealized waifu like Rei, may appear on the surface as a significant act of devotion. However, it ultimately represents a form of escapism, a retreat from the realities of life. True bravery involves actively participating in the world, embracing personal growth, and accepting the imperfections and challenges that come with it. It suggests that this path leads to a more profound and fulfilling connection, one that is grounded in reality and personal development, rather than escaping from it. Shinji was eternally young, which symbolized an arrest in development. It was essential for him to embark on a journey of self-discovery, delving into his inner life. Furthermore, he sought a version of a love interest who also possessed a profound inner world worth exploring. This pursuit inherently entailed the concept of change. As mentioned earlier, reaching a state of neutrality, where there is no room for further growth, is comparable to being like lightning that has dissipated. It's done. There is no more. And to have the potential for change without acting on it creates an environment of tension and anxiety. Carl Jung's quote, "How can I be substantial if I fail to cast a shadow?" serves as an insightful starting point for understanding Shinji's character. Shinji grapples with certain shadow aspects of his personality, elements he dislikes and thus chooses to ignore or shun. This avoidance has a significant impact on his behavior, potentially leading to emotional and spiritual unhealthiness. The recurring theme in the show revolves around Shinji's reluctance to confront his inferior self, those suppressed and undesirable facets of his personality. This avoidance leaves him in a constant state of tension, unable to achieve personal growth. In contrast, Rei is depicted as having no shadow at all, indicating that she lacks an inner life. Shinji's desire to grow alongside someone reflects a maturing aspect of his character. He seeks personal development and meaningful connections, demonstrating a positive instinct for growth and self-improvement. The series showcases flawed attachment styles, so I'll go over some now, and perhaps you'll see how applicable they are. Children with anxious ambivalent attachment patterns tend to be overly preoccupied with their caregiver's availability. They may become distressed when their caregiver leaves and are difficult to soothe upon their return. These individuals often crave intimacy and reassurance in their adult relationships, but they may also be fearful of rejection or abandonment. They may exhibit high levels of anxiety and uncertainty in their relationships. In the disorganized style, the caregivers are often neglectful, abusive, or struggling with their own traumas, making them sources of both safety and fear. Children with this attachment style show extreme and confused behaviors during separation, such as intense anxiety or contradictory actions, due to the profound uncertainty about their safety and protection. Children with avoidant attachment styles often suppress their attachment needs. I could probably go on, but I just wanted to point out a few dynamics that we see in the series. The show is not particularly consistent with its characters, and at times, they exhibit different types of behaviors. The series even features different timelines where new characters are introduced. The aim of secure attachment is to become less needy and not rely on your attachment figure as a support mechanism. Not because you have problems and think it best to hide them, but because you genuinely are a healthier individual. It's because your attachment figure genuinely cares for you that you're able to develop this level of self-sufficiency and internal stability. So therefore, it is normal to want an attachment figure that not only cares about you, but also one is securely attached as well. Like I mentioned earlier, you can also achieve this through metacognition, provided that you confront, witness, and regard the consciously observable psychic activity of your everyday thoughts, as well as allowing psychic phenomenon that is unpleasant, like aspects of yourself that you consider inferior, to be known, expressed, and accepted irrespective of the discomfort they bring to your ego. Viktor Frankl is an Austrian neurologist, psychiatrist, and Holocaust survivor. He was quoted saying, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." What this means is that just because you have a certain impulse, you don't have to suppress it, and you don't have to act on it. You can experience it and understand that how you respond to it is up to you. This is part of the process of metacognition. Carl Jung's quote, "How can I be substantial if I fail to cast a shadow?" offers a valuable perspective on Shinji's character. Shinji struggles with the darker parts of his personality, the aspects he doesn't like and prefers to avoid or reject. This avoidance of confronting and integrating these shadow aspects hinders his personal development and can result in negative emotional and spiritual consequences. This avoidance leaves him in a constant state of tension, unable to achieve personal growth. The show frequently explores the theme of Shinji's hesitation to face the less favorable parts of his personality, the aspects he suppresses and deems undesirable. His avoidance of these elements keeps him in a continuous state of unease, preventing him from achieving personal development. And sometimes, the thing he must allow to play out is anxiety itself. He must allow it to run its course, since it wishes to become expressed and experienced, and simply witness it. One thing is for certain: avoidance and escapism is not the answer. Shinji eventually realizes that it is better to grow together with someone. He aims to move beyond his old attachment styles, which focused on just being close to an attachment figure and leaning on them heavily. Instead, he wants deeper, more meaningful relationships with his attachment figures, going beyond mere surface-level connections. This reflects a maturing aspect of his character. Here he is beginning to seek personal development and meaningful connections, demonstrating a positive instinct for growth and self-improvement. To further touch upon some of the attachment styles that I believe are relevant to the series, I wish to say this: the avoidant attachment style, characterized by the belief that one is a burden to their attachment figure. This belief often arises in children who, despite needing care, fear their behavior may push caregivers away. In avoidant attachment, there's a paradoxical desire to remain close to the attachment figure, while simultaneously fearing that closeness could be disruptive. They essentially float around at a particular distance, both physically and emotionally. This fear can result in the child maintaining a cautious distance, limiting certain behaviors, and experiencing emotional outbursts due to internal conflict and inability to regulate emotions effectively. Another attachment style is ambivalent attachment, where there is a constant need for attention and access to the attachment figure. The strategy here is to become extra noticeable and expressive, because more energy is required to attain attention from your attachment figure. A disorganized attachment is a complex attachment style, where a child perceives their caregiver as both a source of safety and fear. This contradiction arises when a caregiver behaves unpredictably, such as displaying sudden anger or showing intense stress. Despite these behaviors, the child recognizes that they depend on the caregiver for survival, creating a situation where the child feels they must stay close to this person despite the fear or discomfort they may cause. This attachment style is somewhat complex in relation to proximity. The child's need for closeness is conflicted by their fear, resulting in an awkward and challenging dynamic. The child may struggle with balancing the need for safety and the instinct to avoid a source of fear, leading to disorganized behaviors and responses towards the caregiver. And because attachment styles formed in childhood influence your attitude towards relationships later in life, it could be said that you might be drawn to a love interest that evokes a familiar pattern of disorganized behavior. Note that these descriptions are a simplification, and the attachment theory includes more nuances and additional categories. So, to reiterate, Shinji was in a position that gave him unlimited access to Rei. And upon being given this unlimited access to her, he realized that the component he wanted most of all from her was genuine connection and mutual growth with her. Shinji's path to self-awareness requires him to face and embrace the parts of himself he views negatively. The traits or feelings we dislike or neglect don't vanish. They remain in our subconscious as part of our shadow. If these shadow aspects are not acknowledged, they can cause self-destructive behavior. These hidden parts of us still seek expression and will often do so unexpectedly, typically in harmful ways. Moreover, Shinji understands that overcoming his internal struggles is not a one-time event. The process of growth and self-acceptance is ongoing, and he wishes to share this journey with Rei. This realization marks a significant development in his character, moving beyond a simplistic desire for physical closeness to a deeper, more introspective pursuit of growth within the context of his relationships to others. This analysis merely scratches the surface of a complex and intriguing dynamic between the characters, reflecting broader themes of attachment, personal growth, and the continuous nature of self-discovery. And that's all I have to say for now. I hope you enjoyed the video.